Yeah, I think for me, I'll preface my comments with this at first. The only way I'm trading Myles Garrett is if Myles Garrett tells me he no longer wants to play here. I'm not going to willingly just part ways with the best player on my team because the situation is as bad as it is, regardless of what the return on investment can be. I think that people got to understand the emotional tie and the relationships that Myles Garrett has built in the city. And the Browns fan base are already in a position to where apathy is starting to set in, basically meaning, how much of a damn do we still give, right? And you look at the situation with Nick Chubb, for example, a guy that was beloved fan favorite that probably won't play another down in the city of Cleveland. That's yet to be determined, but you've already lost him. And that's an emotional tie that we're going to have to deal with. And you're going to tell this fan base that you're going to willingly part ways with Myles Garrett. I just don't think that's something that's going to sit well with anybody, regardless of what your long term plans is. Now, if Myles comes to you and says, yeah, trade me, then you need to respect the man's wishes based on everything that he has done for your organization and get him up out of here to wherever it is that he wants to go. Will it warrant a top 10, top 15 pick? Probably not, but you'll still get a first round pick. And whoever has those picks at their disposal, they can make a decision on can they identify talent in the late first round, or are they going to package those picks to try to move up in the first round in another year, etc. So it's more than one way to skin the cat. But regardless of it, if Myles Garrett ends up traded, I don't think this regime should be responsible for making the trade or using those draft picks to get other assets on this football team.
If you're going through a complete rebuild, and that's what a decision to trade Myles Garrett would trigger, you clean house top to bottom, every front office person, every coach on the staff, every player who's not on a rookie deal, bye-bye. Like, you have to start from rock bottom. And if you're going to go through that process, it makes no sense to allow the coaching staff that got you to said process to be the ones to try and drag you out of it. And that's why I said this is a franchise-altering decision that all starts with Myles Garrett. If they decide to go that route and they feel that's in the best interest of their franchise, I just can't fathom a world, and I think it would be frankly stupid, to allow the people who got you in that position to now try and get you out. That's where you put the head off the snake, and you got to start fresh. It may not be an upgrade. It may be a worse decision. Whoever you hire to replace Barry and Stefanski may not actually be better, but they deserve a chance as opposed to letting the same guys who got you here run it back.
It's like saying it's like being the leader of a corporation and you the CEO. The CEO has to file for Chapter 11, and then you're like, well, we're going to give him a bonus and bring him back after you file for bankruptcy. No, you just said your business model was garbage. You guys lost money. You had to file for bankruptcy, but you're running it back with the people that helped you get to bankruptcy. It don't make no sense. And the optics look crazy because what it will end up looking like, even though it won't be this, it'll look like you chose Suits over a Hall of Famer. Mm-hmm. You remember how we looked at Reinsdorf in Chicago when they broke up the Bulls? And we were like, how can you break up the Bulls and they won like 12 in a row? It just looks like you chose, I want to do it my way. We're going to tear it down again. And you're like, but you got rid of Myles Garrett and now you get picks and you're going to sit here and preach to us patience or you're playing again. And we're like, I don't want to look at you guys. I don't want to look at no plan. I just want, if we're going to lose Myles Garrett, there needs to be collateral damage where nobody comes back from that.
I think in his heart of hearts, Cleveland is where Myles Garrett wants to be. I think if it was up to him and all things was equal, he would retire a member of the Cleveland Browns. But I think there's also a real reason that he decided to go public with these comments. You're putting a team that you love and really want to play for on a hot seat, and you're putting them on public notice. Mm-hmm. And it's basically saying like, hey, man, I'm getting fed up. And maybe if I go about this publicly, y'all can hear my cries, right? I want to be a part of a consistent winning organization, and for him to go about it the way that he did, hopefully Jimmy and D Haslam can hear him loud and clear, and they make whatever changes is necessary. It's a whole lot different, and it hits a whole lot harder when your most productive player over the last 25, 26 years of your franchise speaks out as loudly as he did.
when your best player talks, you have to listen, or you're going to lose your best player, not just from a physical standpoint in terms of maybe you trade him, but from an emotional and locked in standpoint. And Myles wears the C on his chest. He's one of the captains of this team. He's one of the leaders of the franchise. And when he says, show me a plan to win or I don't want to be here. I mean, does anyone blame Myles for saying what he did? I have no issue whatsoever with his comments. If I was in year 8, if I was on a Hall of Fame trajectory, if I'm now the first player in NFL history to record 100 sacks before the age of 29, yeah, I'd want to have some playoff wins to show for it. And I thought the fact he doubled down on those comments following the Bengals game with the Lawrence Taylor comparison were pretty telling, because through the first 7.8 years of his career, G, you know him better than I do, Myles has never had that tone and never said those words. It was always, I'm in Cleveland forever. This is the first time he's ever indicated even a slight willingness to imagine himself in another team's uniform. And if he's reached that point, and I guess this is my big picture with all of this, if he's reached that point, to me, that signals that A, he doesn't necessarily believe in the vision that Barry and Stefanski pitched him on to start the season. 2, he's lost faith in the quarterback room. And you could take, I know he didn't say Deshaun by name on Friday. He said it wasn't necessarily Deshaun he was talking about on Sunday. Whatever. This is part of the fallout from the Deshaun Watson trade. They don't have as much talent as they should have because they lost the picks. Deshaun hasn't been the player, yada, yada, yada. I don't blame him. I'd want to win too. And frankly, they haven't done enough winning throughout his tenure here. Myles has done almost everything he possibly could to put them in a position to succeed. The guys around him, the franchise around him, the coaching staff around him, they haven't lived up to their end of the bill in this equation.
Well, I mean, it clearly signals more to just a bad season, right? I think everything that you're pointing to is signaling to, okay, internally, maybe it's been bad culture, right? And maybe Myles has looked around because, you know, if you go back to some of his comments, he says, we need to get better, and not just on the field, but upstairs in the front office as well. When you talk about just, you know, looking at the quarterback room and growing sour there, just the entirety of the offense. One of the things he says so sarcastically that, you know, made a lot of sense. He says, you know, sometimes the defense just got to step up, because if the offense is only capable of putting up 17 points, that means we got to hold our opponents to 14. Newsflash, the Cleveland Browns have scored a combined 13 points in the last 2 games, right? And so, like, to your point, like the issues is plentiful and they are everywhere. And, you know, it's signaling to a lot of things, more than just the Browns having one of the worst seasons since they went, 0-16. So,
yeah, listen, I'm not source guy, but I heard from somebody very close to Myles Garrett, and the quote was, we're not trying to have him be Joe Thomas. This was a year ago. And, you know, Myles did a very good job of he went under the radar, put his head down, put his nose down, and played football. I think the Defensive Player of the Year award kind of pacified some of the stuff. He felt like you were on the right track. And let's not forget, this was supposed to be a Super Bowl window for the Cleveland Browns. Mm-hmm. This 5 years was a Super Bowl window for the Browns, and they spent 3 of those years with under 500 records, losing records in that 5-year window. Look, I've said this all along. Good teams, good coaches, and good general managers would pivot, and they would say, listen, Kevin Stefanski has not been forceful enough about what he needs to be about it. Is, listen, guys, the shine is down. We need to win football games. We shouldn't be at the point where we're talking about we got to see what we got in DTR. That like to a championship contender team, like, you got to think about it. When you see a Zadarius Smith walk off to another team, an Amari Cooper walk off to another team, JOK get injured for the whole year, nothing coming back. You're looking at guys that are in your locker room talking about, well, it's a business decision. That type of rhetoric and that type of energy tells you that the people at top are not serious. There is nothing wrong with getting in front of a camera and saying this aloud. I don't know who we are, but listen, we are not having no losing season, and people better grab onto this rope, because I'm watching all film work. But it didn't seem that the energy ain't been there, that effort, that passion ain't been there. And now you sitting here trying to tell a dude, what did you learn from the 1-31? What did you learn? Jimmy Haslam, you were ahead of this organization when that happened. If you're 1-31 and you lose Joe Thomas, and Joe Thomas retires without one playoff victory, what did you learn? So when Myles Garrett sits in front of you and say, okay, Joe Thomas was a Hall of Famer, what did you do right by him? Nothing. You clapped it up. You gave him his Ring of Honor thing. He got his little gold jacket, and that was it.
So you mentioned Joe Thomas. He was on Ken and Lima here in Cleveland this morning, and he was asked about Myles Garrett's comments, and I want to read you his quote. You should listen to it as well because his inflection and tone is important here, but I want to read you his quote when they asked him about Myles's comments and his desire to win. Joe Thomas told Ken and Lima on The Fan this morning, quote, I can totally understand that Myles has maybe some different considerations about his career that an offensive lineman just wouldn't have, end quote. I take that as this. When we look at players and the greatest of all time and their legacies, for quarterbacks, it's certainly about Super Bowls, right? For certain positions, your legacy is tied to winning more than others. Did Jonathan Ogden win a Super Bowl?
No. Yeah, actually, he did. Sorry about that.
But that's my point. You don't remember the greatest left tackles because they won Super Bowls or not, right?
No, you just know because they were great, right? Like the Orlando Paces, the Munozes, the Basellis.
Defensive ends are one of those positions where I do think the trophy count on your resume makes a difference. And Myles, who's on a trajectory to be right up there with the greatest of all time at the position, doesn't have that other part of the resume that's going to keep him out of the Mount Rushmore conversations.
Think about this. One of his idols, one of the guys that, he has spent a lot of time with over his career has been Bruce Smith.
Yep.
Bruce Smith is a legendary pass rusher who ended his Hall of Fame career without a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And so you wonder, when you have those type of conversations with your mentor and these things come up, what type of advisement are you getting from another Hall of Famer who's played that same position? So
it's a great point, Earl.
Bruce Smith at one point had the sack record, I do believe. Bruce Smith was for the Buffalo Bills. He kept playing, continued to play for the Washington Redskins, Washington Commanders, Washington football team, whatever you want to call them. But when you talk about the defensive ends that are known for, you think of Deacon Jones because he came up with the word quarterback sack. You think of Michael Strahan because he has the record of most sacks in the season. And you think of the top two. You think of Reggie White and Lawrence Taylor. Reggie White went to the Packers and cemented his legacy by getting that Super Bowl. And you look at Lawrence Taylor, LT, getting that Super Bowl, being one of the first those are 1 and 2. Yeah. And then we look at them because of the totality of the package. And he is correct. Joe Thomas dropping dimes. Offensive lineman, you just known for what you can do and how great you are in your skill set. But when it comes to pass rushers, that's a marquee position, and you are judged based on all of those different accolades as well.
And last thing, and we'll wrap here.
Real quick, because I know we got to get up out of here. I just want to highlight this comment real quick. Bruce did go to 4 in a row. He did, and I think that further illustrates my point. At least Bruce had the opportunity to compete for 4 Super Bowls, even though he didn't win one. And Myles haven't even been in a position to compete for 1, let alone 4.
And those memories from big-time games, the playoff moments, you cannot replicate in the regular season. And you can go back and think of all the best players, take offensive linemen out of the equation. A lot of times your first memory of that player is something they did in the playoffs, when it's a standalone nationally televised game, when the stakes are higher than ever, and you can pinpoint. You go back to Strahan, G. He walked off on the sunset. He beat the perfect undefeated Patriots. The defensive line in that game was dominant. You remember those little things from Michael Strahan. Myles wants those opportunities. He has not been privy to enough of them in Cleveland through the first 8 games of his career. And I can totally understand, and I hold nothing against him for at the end of a 3-12 season right now, 2 games to go, he has met his wits' end.